Jesus girl. Jesus girl. Hey, it's the diary of a Jesus girl. Let the wings of the Spirit of the Lord just swirl. You are in it, but you know you're not a part of this world. And for the swine, you should never cast your pearl. Yes, it's just the diary of a Jesus girl. The diary of a Jesus girl. Welcome to the Diary of a Jesus Girl podcast, where we discuss real-life issues of the committed Christian woman. This podcast will inspire you to love Jesus and impact lives like Jesus. And now it's time for your host, Crystal Day, award-winning author, speaker, and Christian coach.
Welcome to another episode of the Diary of a Jesus Girl podcast. Yes! Listen, we are in September. Like, what? We are less than 4 months away? Last time I checked, we were like 110 days to Christmas. I don't know. It's just always mind blowing how quickly the time is running off. And it just reminds us that, we have to take opportunities, all the opportunities that we get, and just live life to the fullest, and just, try our best to be who God has called us to be, because boy, this life is just going and going. So of course, I'm out of my birthday month, and the celebration, it was amazing. I enjoyed, just, spending time with my family. I enjoyed chilling. I didn't really rest, to be honest, but it was a good chill time. And, as I was thinking about September, and I'm thinking about, okay, I'm now 35 years old, and I'm in the year of becoming, what do I want one of my focus to be? And to be honest, and I shared it on the podcast, my birthday episode. If you have not gotten a chance to go and listen to my birthday episode, I want to task you to go, because I shared 5 money lessons I've learned in my 35 years. And it was very, very transparent. And it was a little bit too, it was too transparent, but I pray that it bless someone. But of course, I shared about money, and money is one of those things that, one, I don't feel like is a topic that I've ever been very comfortable to talk about. Yeah, you talk about it with your friends, that you have debt, that, you want to earn a certain amount of money, that as a Christian, you should be tithing, but there are just some aspect of money that I've just never really enjoyed talking about and face up to. And I've been on this journey for a few years with this money thing, and I just always don't feel like I'm getting it right. But for my 35th year, I'm like, you know what? I desire to be rich. I desire to be wealthy. I desire to be a millionaire. And these things are not going to happen just, I don't buy the lotto, so it just now happen overnight. And as a result, I decided I want to learn more. And they say, whatever your focus is on, you eventually become. So when I spend time with the Lord, when I'm spending time with the Lord, I become a better believer, a better Christ follower, right? When I spend time with my daughter, reading books about parenting, I become a better mother. And as a result, I decided to stop hiding from the money. Yeah, you read every money book every now and then, but, really just stop hiding from the money conversation, because the word of God tells us that, a wise person leave an inheritance for their children and children. And to be honest, growing up in poverty like I did, the inheritance that many of us grew up with is a scarcity mindset, and that's not where I want to go. So I do all that preamble to say that on the podcast today, I decided that we are going to start September strong by talking about money. Dun, dun, dun. A Jesus girl and her money. Yes, that's what we're talking about at the beginning of September, right? And, if you are not on my email list, I want you to join me on my email list, because as I go through this journey of reaching millions, not just by impact, but also in income, I want you to take this journey with me. And I've been our guest for this week I love her content on IG. So there are a lot of persons that we would know and follow on social media that talks about money, right? Which is fine, talk about wealth, etc. But my biasness to her is because she is talking about money on a biblical perspective. And that is not as popular. It is admirable, but I also think it is a powerful calling that she has to equip believers to understand faith and finances without compromising. And girl, may I watch you? So with that being said, I'm introducing you all to Charlene, the money coach. Welcome to the Diary for Jesus Girl podcast, Charlene.
Thank you so much, Crystal. Like, I'm in amazement that I'm actually here on your podcast because I've been a long time listener. That goes to show how God works sometimes.
Listen,
yes, and thank you for having me.
You're most welcome. And I think he's very strategic too, because it would have been okay to invite you at another time, but would Crystal first, because every time I interview somebody, I minister to first, and I get to listen to this episode 2 or 3 times, right? But would I have been in a position where whatever God is going to use you to share today, would I be able to apply? Was I in the season to apply it? So I believe that this is, as my second book, Empowered for Such a Time as This, and you're here at the right time. So here's where I want to start. One, I want you, of course, to share a little bit about yourself. Tell us what is it that you do, and tell us what it is that you do. A little bit about your upbringing, how you grew up, don't tell us how you got into this yet, but just a little bit about you, just Charlene. And of course, I want you to share your salvation story. How did you come to Christ?
Okay. Right. So I am Charlene Tilbanie. I am Jamaican, but I have a weird or uncommon last name. And that's because my husband, his father, was from India. He's now deceased. God bless his soul. But yes, his father migrated from India to Jamaica and met his mother. So I met my husband and ended up with this funny last name. But yes, I am Jamaican. I grew up in Spanish Town, St. Catherine. All my life I spent there. Went to high school in Kingston, then went on to college at the University of the West Indies. And I am an accountant by profession. I did my ACCA exams several years ago. I won't age myself, but I am a chartered accountant by profession. And for the US and Canadian listeners, it's the UK equivalent of a CPA. So that's my professional background. Both my parents are still living. I have one sibling, just one sister, and I come from a very, very close-knit and tight family. We grew up in the church. My sister and I grew up in the church. If I didn't know better, I would think that we were conceived in church because we are MKs. I call them ministers' kids. So we were always at church. We know everything about church. We know how church people think, how they operate. It's all we knew growing up. So because of that, I was very much exposed to Christianity from a very early age. But I have always been the type who, if I'm not sold on something, I don't get into it. So I was not sold on the whole Christianity thing until I became of age, let's say age 11. That's when I became convicted of my sin. For those who know how church runnings go, that's actually pretty late for a child who knows church all her life to actually get saved. But I was not convinced until that point. It was at age 11 that I became convicted of my sin and I decided to give my heart to the Lord. So I would say that sums up my story in a very tight nutshell. Tight family, close-knit family. grew up in Jamaica. I actually migrated to the Cayman Islands about 13 years ago. And that's where I actually met my husband. Go figure, even though he's Jamaican. But yeah, that's my story in a nutshell.
Okay. So here where I want to go. So like you said, you having to found your own experience and faith in Christ and your own timing. And that is a beautiful thing, because the truth is, at the end of the day, the word of God tells us we have to work out our own salvation in fear and trembling. That's it. Mm-hmm. So I guess it leads to know, being an accountant, we understand, your passion for money, but tell us about what life like was growing up in Jamaica. Were you middle class? Were you rich? Were you poor? And what are some of the mindset that you really discovered about yourself and money, especially growing up in the church?
So we were not poor, but we certainly were not rich. My parents, they grew up very, very poor. They grew up in rural. When I said rural, I mean deep country bush, rural St. Elizabeth. So they made a better life for themselves, and they migrated to Spanish Town. And they decided that my sister and I would never want for food, for shelter, and for clothing. So we never went to bed hungry. We never had to worry about being evicted, because I don't know how they did it, but they paid off their mortgage shortly after they bought their house, right? And they made sure that we had clothes on our back. But because of their mindset, having grown up in poverty, my parents were very frugal. They were very, I don't want to say the word tight, because it's not as if they were mean, but they watched money very, very closely. So we didn't have fluff. We didn't have luxury. We didn't know anything about traveling for vacations. Our vacations were going to visit our grandmother in the country. We got secondhand school books. My mother would either have us rent the school books, or we would buy secondhand school books. They would already be marked up, and they would already have crease. When children used to study, they used to fold or crease the pages to mark where they were. Those were the types of books that we got. We wore very basic clothing, no name brand, no luxury. If you got a school bag, it would last you for years, because, listen, money did not grow on trees and it was hard to come by. That was the narrative that we were sold. They didn't come out right and say it, but it was something that was always implied, that there was never enough, that we had to save every single dollar that we got, because we did not know if it was going to run out. And knowing what I know now about money, I realized that it was their background, their upbringing, that caused my parents to behave in the way they did. And that, of course, trickled down to my sister and I. So specifically me, I ended up struggling with scarcity mindset. I ended up struggling with overspending at one point, and then swinging to the other side of the pendulum, which was hoarding money. Like, I started obsessing over money, which of course is very, very unhealthy. Either one of those situations are unhealthy. So the mindset that I grew up with was, there is never enough. You have to watch every penny. You have to go with the basics. You don't spend money on luxury. And what that translated in to me, after having my own job, after start working my own job, my very first job, I started overcompensating for that childhood. So because I could not get the luxuries when I was growing up, I decided to use my own money and buy said luxuries. Turns out that I could not afford those luxuries because my salary was not enough to pay for it. So that caused me to end up in severe debt, credit card debt, personal loans, unsecured loans. All of those things came out of my mindset as it related to money.
You know, you said it, and I probably repeat it again. You said that, they were very frugal, very tight with their money. And the truth is, to an extent, that is part of it. There's a good part, because then, when you are that, then you are able to save. And we know saving is one of the best ways to start growing wealth. But then there is the balance that is needed, because while you're saving, Solomon said it, that you want to still enjoy life. And what you find with a lot of those persons, they are so uptight and don't enjoy the fruits of their labor. That's how Solomon put it, So again, both, and when you are talking, I am thinking about, like, my family. We are spendthrift, because we had little. When we did get enough, we want to just get all the things that we were lacking, So we say, for example, you are eating just tin mackerel for 2 weeks, and you get some extra money. You decide, hey, I'm going to go to Oxtail, for the next week, because, hey, and both scarcity mindset, and both spendthrift mindset, and also that frugal, extreme frugal mindset can be a big issue in our lives, because again, we need a balance. I appreciate that. And anybody that's listening know, we all have a mindset on money, and it's good to understand where you are at in the spectrum, so that you're able to know how to balance. So Charlene, I want to go in riches, because here's the thing. You mentioned that you weren't earning the amount of money, that you weren't earning enough to be living the life that you wanted and being able to buy the things. But as a Christian, it feels like when you talk about, I want to be rich, I want to make a lot of money, then there is this pushback of, no, rich people are this and rich people are bad, and it even go as far as, the money is the root of all evil. Of course, many of us have corrected it to say the love of money is the root of all evil. But then also you have the push to say, just having money, like it's a bad desire. So talk to us as a money coach of how, your thoughts on riches and wealth, and where you are at regarding that.
So let me put some color first before I jump into that. So I mentioned that because of my background, I pretty much overcompensated by spending what I did not have. That ended up resulting in me racking up $22,000 worth of debt. It resulted in me suffering sleepless nights, anxiety, lack of peace, because yes, I spent to cover the issues that were going on underneath, right? But that was just a temporary fix. Now, having to face the spiraling debt situation, I was now faced with negative emotions, the lack of peace, not knowing if I would have enough money to put gas in my car, knowing that even if I put the grocery bill on the credit card, it's something that I would have to pay off next month. And all of that spiraled to the point where, I don't know if you know my story, Crystal, but one of my rock bottom come to Jesus moments was when I owed a bank, one of the banks who I borrowed money from, I owed them money. They thought that I was going to abandon my obligations. And what they did was, on payday, they went into my account, took out all of the money that I owed them, and that left me with less than $100 to get through on payday. That was my, you have to face the situation, Charlene moment. Now, when I got to that point, luckily or fortunate for me, my relationship with God at that point had started changing. Because even though I had grown up in the church, and even though I got saved early, I did not have a true, deep relationship with God. There were weeks when I wouldn't read my Bible. There were weeks when I would not pray. I would just go to church and go back home, out of routine. But in my 20s, I started developing a deep relationship with God. And I realized that I could talk to him about anything, pray to him about any situation. And not only that, I started reading the Bible for myself. So when I had that rock bottom, depressing moment so many years ago, I went to God about it. And he essentially did not fix the situation overnight, but he pointed me to resources that could help me. He also gave me the motivation and the discipline to get out of the debt situation. And by virtue of doing that, I started digging into the scriptures for myself. And that's when I realized that the narrative that we have been taught or that has been passed down to us for decades about Christianity, about the Bible, and about wealth was totally skewed. It's totally flawed. It's wrong. And dare I say it, from the pit of hell. So my view on riches and wealth as a Jesus girl, as a child of God, has changed tremendously because now I realize that wealth is from God, that abundance is from God, that there is nothing wrong with having the desire to get wealth because the power to get wealth does come from God. If you read Deuteronomy 8, verse 18, it says, remember the Lord your God because it is he who has given you the power and the ability to get wealth. I started realizing that riches and wealth is not the problem. It's our perspective about the riches and the wealth that is a problem. If money becomes something that we chase after, something that we obsess over, if it becomes an idol, if we start worshiping it, if we start sacrificing our Christian values and beliefs to go after money, then that's when money is the issue. If we adopt the healthy biblical scriptural mindset and perspective about money, that all it is a tool that can be used to expand the kingdom of God here on earth, then our view about money will totally transform. We'll start embracing means, biblical and right means to get wealth. We won't shun it. We won't skew over to the scarcity mindset, but we'll start thinking abundantly and thinking positive thoughts about money. We won't turn down opportunities that come our way to earn more money, but we'll start actually looking for it and start asking God for favor and increase and network and opportunities for us to make more money because we'll realize that it's not about us. It's all about him and what he wants us to do with the money.
Wow. Powerful takeaway. So here's where I want to go because once we talk about Jesus girl and our money and you have shared, that your own, moments of down and how I want you share your story of how you got out of it. So what was the plan, like step by step to get out of it, right? So answer that one first and then I get into the next question.
So the first step was to actually realize the issue. We usually want to jump to the physical, tactical strategies. You have to start with the emotions, like face the numbers and face the reality that you're broke. And that was what I had to do. I realized that I could not continue along the same path that I was continuing and actually thrive. It had gotten to the point where it was depressing. It got to the point where it was unsustainable. So the first thing I had to do was face the reality. The second thing that I did was zoom out. I love to simplify things. I don't know if it's good or bad, but that's how I treat situations and how I teach my clients to. I zoom all the way out. And when I zoomed out at my situation, I said, okay, Charlene, you are earning an income. You need to find out where the income is going, right? Because money is coming in, it's going out, and more of it is going out than you're bringing in. So where is it going? So then I decided to start writing down every penny that I was spending. Some might think that's obsession, but listen, drastic situations call for drastic measures. So I went drastic because I'm like, this has to change. Something needs to turn around. because I cannot continue like this anymore. So I just got a little notebook and I started writing down every dollar. It wasn't like a Monday or the first day of the month or New Year. No, it was a random day in May, I remember. I just went to the grocery store, got a notebook, and I started writing it down. And then it was clear where my money was going. It wasn't on name brand stuff. It wasn't on luxurious items. It was literally little things that I was spending my money on. There's a saying that all it takes to sink a large ship is a small leak. That was what was happening with my money. Small leaks in my bank account, money over there, money down there, walk into the grocery store to buy one thing and walk out with a dozen. And it was those are the things that I had to start attacking. So I started plugging the holes because now I had the data in front of me to show the areas that I could cut back on. Then I made a realistic budget. I used to budget before, but the problem was it was unrealistic. So then I used the information that I had in front of me and made a realistic budget. Then I realized that I had disposable income. I actually had money left over. So that money that was left over, I started using it to pay extra on my debt. And once the debt started falling off little by little, I became motivated, and at one point I became too obsessed. I'm not going to lie. Became too obsessed with paying off the debt. But one of the major things that I did was to move apartments. At the time, one of my biggest expenses was my rent. So I decided to move apartments, find a cheaper apartment. It was small. I hated every day of those 13 months. But it allowed me to save even more money, which I could then use to get out of debt faster. So that's all I did. Took a step-by-step, diligent approach to attacking the debt one by one. And in 15 months, I had cleared it all off. And it's been over 10 years and I haven't looked back since.
Oh, well, here's where I want to go. How do you develop that level of discipline? Because I feel like even for me, there are many times I'm like, okay, all right, I'm in debt. I'm going to be focused. And then some kind of shiny syndrome and the discipline you just don't get the discipline. So is there a way, like any encouragement of even how you work with your clients to do that?
Sure. Great question. So I encourage anybody who has any goal whatsoever. We are talking about money today, but it can apply to any goal. Is first you have to identify your why. It sounds cliche. I know we've heard it being touted all around on social media, but the reality is you have to know why you are pursuing any particular goal. So start with that. My why was I needed to be free from the negative emotions that were plaguing me. That was simply it. I could not deal with the anxiety anymore. I couldn't deal with the sleeplessness anymore. I could not deal with the shame, because you have to realize I was in a corporate job, a well-paying corporate job. I had actually moved countries and everybody thought I was doing okay when in fact I was legit broke. So that guilt and that shame that plagued me, I had to get rid of it. So that was my why. For somebody else who, they probably know their why, but they still cannot get the discipline or develop the discipline or the grit to get out of their situation, I would ask them to drill deeper. Identify your money story. Identify your money triggers, right? Or backgrounds are varied, or childhoods are varied. What we were taught or not taught about money varies from household to household. So how you are handling money might just be a symptom of your childhood. So see if you can figure out exactly where your spending tendencies are coming from, and then face it and see if you can cut it out from the root or address it in some other way or fashion. So for somebody who grew up seeing their parents be a spendthrift, and they grew up as an adult and they are spendthrifts, they might realize that, hey, I'm just mirroring what my mom and my dad did. And then that person could say, is this something that I want to continue doing for the rest of my life? And that might just be the clincher. They just might be able to short circuit the trigger right there and change your situation. So you have to go back to why you are acting the way you do in order to change the situation. The next thing I would say is get a physical reminder, right? Get a physical reminder that you can look at to help to motivate you. So for some persons, I encourage them to get a simple piece of cartridge paper or poster board, or if you have a whiteboard, and just list all of your debts on it, right? List all of it. You can rank it how you want to rank it, either smallest to largest, largest to smallest. And you have that visual reminder in front of you to show you what you are focusing on. And then as you pay them off, you just draw a line through it. And it might take a month, it might take 2 months, it might take 6 months, it might take a year. But every day you look at this thing, you see visual progress that, hey, it might be hard, but I'm actually doing this thing. For some persons, they might not want to have a physical reminder, visual reminder in front of them because, you might live with other persons. You can create one on your phone, create one and save it as your desktop background. Just something that you can always look at to keep you motivated to get out of the situation. The last tool that many persons don't realize is powerful is having someone in your corner to cheer you on. Accountability. So for some, it's a coach, right? Like me. But for others, it might just be a friend or a family member who you can openly confide with to say, I'm struggling with this. This is what I want to do. Please hold me accountable. Please check in with me every week or every 2 weeks when I get paid or every month to see how I'm doing. And by virtue of you having someone to report to answer to, it helps you to keep motivated. I have clients who tell me all the time that they hear my voice in their head. They're in the store about to spend money on something that they know is outside of the plan. And they literally hear my voice in their head telling them no, telling them, is that a part of the plan? So having that accountability really does help. It's underrated, but it's very, very, very powerful.
Yes. Listen, I love these practical strategies that you are sharing. And, it's just like you said, the intentionality. And I, of course, believe in the power of coaching and accountability. I talk about it on the podcast a lot because there is another level when you accountability just helps you on another level to help to grow you. And I'm so blessed by what you would have shared. So Charlene, I don't want, because you have given us a lot of meat and, just a lot to process. And I know that somebody that's listening, you probably need to go and re-listen it because in everything that she's saying, it's a moment for us to kind of do our self-reflection. Some of you might be happy where you're at in your finances in terms of probably you're working on your debt. Probably you are okay with your finances. But the question is, there's always a greater potential that exists. Like you will never arrive. You never hear a billionaire say, you know what, because I'm a billionaire, I'm going to stop working. I'm going to stop earning, no matter what. Right. So there's always a place to grow. So as you listen to this podcast, ask yourself, where you're at in your process. Am I going to be intentional about my finances? And for me, and I know for many people for many years, we just work. Or if you have a business, you earn, you pay your bills. For some persons, they might say, I might touch a little bit into investments. Or for some persons, they might say, I want to have a little side hustle. For some persons, they're just comfortable in the debt. No matter where. And one of the things that I had to be honest with myself about when I was doing that birthday episode about the money is that no matter, even if you feel like you're in $22,000 debt like Charlene and you are 40 years old, you can dig yourself out of that. You understand? I hear my 21-year-old sister feels like she has not accomplished anything and I'm like, You're 21. And it just means that it's a societal pressure of us feeling like we're always supposed to have it all together. And the truth is, in many areas of our lives, we don't have it together, right? Some of us, it could be our health. Some of us, it could be our spiritual life. Some of us, it could be our personal life. Some of us, we're dissatisfied in other areas. And it's okay to stop and say, I'm dissatisfied. I believe that I can be in a better place, and how am I going to do that? So, Charlene, one of the things that I was reminded and I shared on the podcast too was there are 3 main ways to build wealth: save more, spend less, invest wisely. And you have kind of challenged us, because once you start to pay off your debts, you will be able to be in a better position to do all 3. So you have given us some debt tips. I want you to give us some wealth tips now, right? So we know that one of the major ways is to pay off debt, but give us 3 specific steps that you would say for us to be more happy or more contented in our wealth building journey. What would you say?
To be content in your wealth building journey?
Yes. And to be happy, looking forward to that then.
Oh, that's a deep question, Crystal. As a Jesus girl, as a church girl, your contentment and happiness has to come from Christ. It has to come from Him. It cannot come from any other source, because if you try to get it from any other source, it will be a gaping hole that will never, ever, ever be filled. So for anyone, no matter what part of your journey you are on, whatever stage you are, I challenge you to get close to God and get your source of contentment and happiness from Him. The next thing is to essentially know why you're doing what you're doing. Know why you're spending money on this particular area, and see if that matches up with the word, then you know that you're pleasing God, and thereby you will gain contentment from it. So for me, that's all it boils down to, because the richest person in the world is not totally happy. And that's why you'll hear persons say that money cannot buy happiness, because money of itself cannot buy happiness for real. Because true peace, true contentment, true satisfaction only comes from God. That's why Paul himself said, I'm happy with and I'm happy without. I've learned to be content with and I learned to be content without. Because at the end of the day, it is only God who can actually help us to be content, to be peaceful, to be happy wherever we are in life. We have money, we're happy. We don't have money, we're happy, we are content. Does that answer your question? I feel like there was a second part that I missed.
Yeah, just I guess the additional part is just give us 3 tips on things that we can do to start building our wealth.
To build your wealth, money is actually the practical part of money is actually simply, in order to build wealth, you need to have money to build wealth, right? You need to have money coming in from somewhere. You need an income. Then once you have that income, the key is to ensure that you have money left over after you have paid your expenses. So you need to have what we call disposable income, leftover cash. That's all it is. Now, the key is, what do you do with that leftover income? What do you do with that disposable income? The key is to invest it in income-producing assets. Many of us, we use it to buy stuff that we don't need. And that's how sometimes we end up in debt, right? No, use that money, that leftover money, and you use it to invest in things like the stock market. The stock market is one of the greatest ways that you can actually build wealth. It helps to generate passive income. The money compounds and it grows and it builds wealth that you can then use to leave an inheritance for your children's children. The next thing that you can use that leftover money to invest in is yourself. Very underrated too. You can use the money to go back to school, to learn new skills that you can then use to monetize and bring in an income. And the third thing that you can use that disposable income to invest in, it's one of my favorites, is a business. You can use your money to invest in a business that can actually start bringing in even more income so that you can start increasing your wealth, building a legacy, leaving a legacy, etc.
Listen, all right, that's it. I mean, what else should we add, right? What else can we add? And guys, we are talking about a Jesus girl and our money. And one of the things, our biggest takeaway is that, hey, money, as the Bible says, answer it all things. We are not going to be women. And if you're a man that's listening, a man of God that is allowing money to become an idol, right? We're not going to compromise our standards and compromise